Welcome to the Joey Awaken Podcast. My guest today is Dorian Johnson. He is a motivational speaker, digital marketing and content creator, award winning author, and influencer. Welcome to the podcast, Dorian.
Thank you, Joey. I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for being here. Tell us who is
Could.
Dorian Johnson.
Well, some days I know, and some days I don't. But I can tell you that through certain experiences, I've learned more and more about who I am and what it takes to become a person who does know who you are. Um, I'll just start off by saying I had an experience almost 7 years ago that no parent would want to ever go through. I lost my oldest son in a hiking accident, and prior to that, I've been divorced going on 13 years, and about halfway through, about 5 years into it, is about the time my oldest son passed away. So you get to a point where you're working through things and figuring yourself out, and then it's like this happens and it breaks your mind, and so you have to work through not only the loss, but you have to work through the reality of where you're at. And some days are tougher than others, but it was just before Memorial Day weekend, 2017. It was the Thursday before, and he's 19 years old. He had hundreds of miles on his boots. He had hiked and hiked all over the mountains around, and so I wasn't concerned about him saying, "Hey, I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go somewhere where I haven't ever been." And he had just gotten a pup. She was 10 weeks old. And so he took her with him, and he went to this place where there's a river, a beautiful river, but it was overflowing because of record runoff. And we had talked about, the concern, don't get close to the river and all of that. However, it's a big campground right by the river. And so he parked and took his hike. And I've heard that hike was really tough. Okay. I talked to other people and they said, yeah, it's pretty brutal. Well, he left about 1 o'clock that afternoon. And just after 5, it was about 20 minutes after 5, I get a text from him, which surprised me because I didn't think he was going to have service up that canyon. But I get a text that says, "This is a beast of a hike, but talk about a view." And that's the last text I ever got from him. That's the last communication I had with him. And I kept sending him texts and tried to call and, say, what's it all about? And is it, what does that mean? Well, I didn't get any response back. And so, it gets later and later, and I anticipated him coming back a lot earlier. Well, by the time it gets dark and it's close to midnight, and I don't have any response back from him. That's not him. That is not him. He would respond back to me. So I decided to go start, into town and check with some of his friends. His graduation for high school that weekend. He had some friends who were graduating, and so I checked with them, and they're like, "We haven't seen him. We haven't seen him all day." So went to the sheriff's department and just wanted to ask them, say, I know the vicinity of where he went hiking. I'm going to go up there and check because I haven't heard anything. But how do I respond back if he's hurt? I can't. I don't want to just leave him there, and then if I need help getting him out. Well, I had an officer go up with me, and we started looking around, and he, my son, had borrowed an Isuzu Trooper from his friend, and the starter wasn't good. He kept having problems with it, so we saw the starter or the Trooper, and we went over. Well, the keys were locked in it, so we thought, okay, well, that's a little different. So I was hiking boots in the back of the Isuzu or the Trooper, but what he had done is he went hiking. There's a canyon where he went hiking, and there's a trail on the west side, and it takes you up this trail, and you have to kind of scale the mountain a little bit and get up on top. There's not a trail on the east side, the opposite side. So he came down the other side, and there's no trail. Once you get closer to the river, it gets really steep, and the willows are nasty. The water's high. There's no trail along the river. We don't know what happened. We don't know. We have no idea. But he had his pup with him. We don't know if she got too close. We don't know if it's too steep, and he went in. But we started looking after midnight, called the search and rescue. And at first I'm like, wait a second. Why? I didn't, we had no idea what had happened. But my first response is, why are we making a big deal about this? I just need somebody here just in case, I need help getting him out and that. But they came in and we searched all day. As soon as it gets light, we searched all day Friday. On Saturday, just before noon, they found him in the river, and he was about 200 or 300 yards. They wouldn't let any of us go up where they found him, but about 200 or 300 yards from where the trailhead started. So we know that he had kind of got off course a little bit, trying to figure out how to cross the river and that. But tell you what, the search itself, it was absolutely amazing to see how many individuals were so willing to step up and search that hard, specifically for my son.
Mm-hmm.
And the tough part is when you're watching everybody doing that, and you can't help because you're going to step on the tracks or you're going to interfere with the search.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to stand there and feel so helpless and hopeless and embarrassed, almost like I can't even help find my own son, And so they brought in 2 helicopters. One of them was a life flight. And I was like, well, did you guys find him? Or, do you guys is there any sign of him? They said what they would do is they would go above the trees and look down in, because there was no way that they could see everything they needed to see from the ground. But that was the point where I knew that this was real. It became real because I'm standing there watching, and the life flight helicopter is going back and forth, and I just break down. I'm just like, this cannot be happening. This isn't, no one should feel like they have to stand there and just watch everybody else try to find your son when it can't be. This really isn't true,
Mm-hmm.
And the second helicopter came in about 9 o'clock on Friday night, and it was an infrared. They had called we were on the border, where this was on the border of Idaho and Utah. And so they had reached out to the International Air Guard down in Ogden, Utah, and they needed to do some training in that anyway. So they brought up the infrared helicopter, and huge, amazingly huge. But they didn't find anything, but it was the hard part is having all of this hope that we're going to have the outcome we want or that we're looking for. And when it doesn't happen, you can't, it's not that you are asking why or what could, why couldn't we've done anything different? It just, that's what it is. But the peace, and it sounds crazy, but the peace that came once they said we found him in the river, at least we knew what we had to at least I can say this for me. I knew what I was going to have to deal with as opposed to the complete unknown, you know? And so I will always be
Mm-hmm.
grateful. First and foremost, I will always be grateful to not only law enforcement, search and rescue, all of the volunteers. I mean, everybody who was involved with that search. You know, there were some connections that were built there that I never could have, um, I never would have connected with people like I did if that, if I didn't have that experience. I guess that's there are certain beautiful parts that come away from an experience like that you learn so much from. That's the only way that certain things can happen. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the funnest, it's not the best, but it's just what it is, you know?
How were you feeling? I can imagine you walking, you know, with your heart just beating fast, just hoping to hear good news.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That had to been a crazy experience where, to be honest, if it was me, just me sitting here and thinking about if it was one of my children, I would just go crazy. So I could just
Oh,
imagine you at that very moment. You know, what were you feeling, and how was your emotions at that time?
when okay, first thing on Friday morning after the life flight helicopter had come in, I realized, and it was a little rainy and that, but I also knew I needed to go. I needed to step away for just a minute, and that sounds crazy because you would think that you would want to be there the whole entire time. But I knew I needed, I need to go get something to eat. But also, I didn't really want to eat. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to rest. I didn't want to relax. I didn't want to do anything if I knew that my son was out there and he was hungry. He
Hmm.
didn't have
Hmm.
anything to eat. If he was thirsty, didn't have anything to drink. If he was hurt and scared, I couldn't relax. So
Hmm.
I felt guilty in the process of trying to, be a part of this. However, I went in town and just so that I could grab a little something. I didn't need much, but just something. It being Memorial Day weekend, this is not a very big town. Probably 5,000 with the surrounding area, maybe 7,500 in the county and that. But when I went into this grocery store, I'm seeing all these people who I know and who know Bayland, and everybody is getting ready to go out camping and making memories, having fun, and I saw a few people who I hadn't seen in quite a while, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? How are you? What are you doing? Are you any big plans for the weekend and stuff?" I could not. I cut the conversation short, and I had to get out of there because it was like I didn't want to say, well, we're looking for Baylor right now. We don't know what happened. He just took off, and so I had no answers for anybody.
Hmm.
And I wasn't getting, I haven't had much support from, family or anything like that since this happened. But I didn't have much support. I didn't know how to respond to my family who I, was struggling to be close to. So I reached out to, and imagine getting a text like this. Okay. So I have a dear friend and just one who we've had so many conversations, and he's one who doesn't have an issue looking at you and saying, but that's not your actions and your words don't match. Let's talk, what's going on here. And so I reached out to him and I
Mm-hmm.
said, in a text, I just said, hey, this is what's happening. Baden went hiking yesterday. Haven't seen him. We're up Cub River. We're not sure exactly what happened. I just want to let you know, just so that, so you're aware. But I was doing it so I could draw strength from him, even though he wasn't going to be close to me. Oh,
Yep.
Joey, imagine getting a text like this um, that I sent my friend, and I'm reaching out because I'm trying to draw strength from someone that I don't I don't have any um, I don't feel like I have any support. I'm there on my own. So I send him this text, just letting him know what's going on. As I'm driving down the road, I'm getting close to where I need to turn off the highway to go back up to where the search camp is. Um, this is what the text says, and it's not what he wanted to say originally. He wanted to tell me that he was on his way and that somehow, some way, he would be there for me, with me, to just to support. But this is what the text said. First thing on Friday morning, let go of the outcome, and you will be taken care of. I threw my phone. I was so mad. It was as if, I could not believe that anybody would say something like that. How dare he knew
Mm-hmm.
how I felt. He knew what I've been through, with my kids and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go back up and it's like I put my head down and I'm going to do whatever it takes to find my son, just to prove to Baden or to Darren, my friend, that we found him. Thanks so very much. I'm going to, throw that
Right.
text back. But the beautiful part, the thing I've learned from that text is the fact that the most important part in life is we have to let go of the outcome and quit trying to control everything that we want to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That that text is the only thing that helped me to acknowledge and be in a place on Saturday morning when they find him in the river, to accept that that's the outcome that it is. You know, it's so hard because so many times in that situation, we want to say, I don't care, whatever it takes. But as a dad, as a man, that's the hardest part because we want to be the one to protect.
Right.
I
Right.
have not ever, I don't question why did this happen to my son. I don't ever look and say, what could I have done different? How could I have protected him? First of all, he's 19 years old. He's an adult. I couldn't have stopped him, right? And yet,
Mm-hmm.
I still look at this and say, you know what? That is a tough, tough thing to learn so many lessons from. And so
Mm-hmm.
once once they said we found him in the river, it was like, you know, the wind is completely out of your sail of hope. But again, at that point, you can say, okay, nothing is real. This cannot have happened. This is just crazy. And yet you can start moving forward, not
Mm-hmm.
past or moving on. You can start moving forward to figure out what you need from that point.
Right.
And so at that point, there's so many things that don't seem real, especially when you walk into a mortuary, a funeral home,
Hmm.
and son is laying there on a
Right.
table, and you touch him, and he's cold, and that's not him. That's his body, but that's not him. And
Hmm.
so there's so many lessons that I have learned since then, but that's the experience that kind of set me on a journey of finding myself, because I realized I had to come to the realization that I'm not special, I'm not unique, I'm no one. I'm just part of a club that I never ever want to be a part of. And yet, the special and unique part is that the lessons that I have learned, I can offer to other people, even if it's someone who has not lost a child, even if it's somebody
Hmm.
who is going through loss or grief and because of a loss. I can look at them and say, you know what, I understand. I don't understand your experience. I don't understand what your trial was, but I sure as hell have felt the feelings and emotions that you're going through.
Hmm.
So that's that's where everything started with my journey of finding what is real, what is authentic, what is who I am.
When did you realize that the text was starting to help you? Because you said that at first you felt like throwing the phone and just smashing it when you first read it.
Well, on Saturday morning, so Friday night when I went back um, to the house to go to sleep, I'd been up almost 40 hours. And I was so exhausted, just beyond exhausted. And so I go to sleep and don't remember anything except waking up and thinking, I'm waking up. I want to stay asleep because I'm waking up to a nightmare. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
when I start heading back up, it was, I don't know how many times I've driven this road, but there were certain parts where I'm just like, I don't know how I stayed on the road just because I'm so tired, but I'm trying my darndest not to cry. And yet, I just remember saying out loud, "Band, just show us where you are." And I just was pleading, "Just show us where you are," because I knew that there was 2 nights that were long and cold, and the
Hmm.
chances of finding him alive was none. You know, just after had been pleading, "Just show us where you are." I remember saying, "I hope you know that I love you with all of my heart." And it was as if this breeze went right through me, just oh, these words. I know it was Balin saying, "There's no question." And it came right back through me. And the words were, "I hope you know that I love you with all of my heart." And I knew at that moment that no matter what, it wasn't a realization that, oh, I'm so grateful that I got that text. It was the fact that the acknowledgement of whatever happens, I'm going to be taken care of.
Hmm.
Not to say that it's nothing that I wanted, um, nothing that any parent ever wants, and yet I knew at that moment that I had let go of the outcome. Because of that, I would be taken care of.
Can you share with us the journey of grief and healing after the tragic loss?
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying there's a movie called Collateral Beauty, and it is with Will Smith. If anybody hasn't watched that movie, it is amazing because of the things that is shared in that movie about the loss of a child, the loss of meaning and reality and all of that stuff. The reason I bring that up is because there has been so much collateral beauty that I have learned and received since. So from that moment, I went forward and, started, mom and I started planning a funeral. We weren't on good terms. But we worked through certain things saying, okay, let's do this for the funeral and all of that. And I ended up speaking at the funeral. And I still don't know how I did it, but he was with me when he was in high school. So we were staying with my mom and dad who were getting older, and he and I helped take care of them. And so I saw him in high school. I saw the real him. I saw, and there was a lot of things that he would struggle with, in regards to knowing that he was trying to do so many things, to try to juggle so many balls to make sure that everybody was happy. And he wasn't trying to people please, but he was just trying to make sure that everybody was doing okay. Siblings, his mom, me. So I wanted to give him the proper send off to say, you know what, this is who he is. Because after I had him the last 3.5 weeks, and he and I were really on good terms. He saw me finally for who I am, and I saw him as an amazing, beautiful, like, there was so much light about him after he had, went and visited with a counselor and realized what was his responsibility, what wasn't his responsibility, all of that. And so at his funeral, as I spoke, I was able to share the reason we love him so much and we trusted him so much, and is because he loved us first. And he trusted us first, and he was kind to us first, and compassionate and understanding and tolerant and accepting. And so sharing all of that, it was just saying, for those people who know him, this is an easy explanation as to why we love him. And so I took that and I said, well, what are all of these things about him that make him who he is? And so in doing research and stuff, I started looking into this, and I realized that all of those things that I expressed about him are virtues. And so the reason I mention that is because I started doing some research and finding out how important virtue is in our lives. The reason I say that is because I in my research, I realized that, or I came to the realization that virtue in the English language means a man of excellence of mind or excellence of character. It's still pretty broad, right? But if you follow it all the way back to the Greek word and the Greek definition, it means a manifestation of power. So if we offer kindness or compassion or integrity or honesty or any of these things, there's power in that, even if somebody does not receive our kindness. If they just throw it away, it doesn't matter. There's still power there. So the reason I bring that up is because I was visiting with a counselor. She had lost her daughter at 19. I didn't go to her to work through all of this stuff, but I asked her, what if virtue such as courage and honesty and love and integrity and gratitude and humility, what if those are there in your conversations with people in counseling? I said, how would that change things? She said it would change the whole dynamic of a conversation. because fear and doubt
Mm-hmm.
and guilt and shame cannot stay in the same room as love and honor and happiness and
Mm-hmm.
joy and all of that. So what I ended up doing was I started looking more into the core virtues. And there's a huge difference between a virtue and a value. Values can change, but what a
Mm-hmm.
virtue is, if it's something that's already inside of us, all we have to do is wake that up if that's what we need, right? So, we talk about courage doesn't have to be there if you're not afraid. Once you're afraid, then all you have to do is wake up courage to whatever capacity you need that courage. So I ended up, for a visual for my
Mm-hmm.
friend who's a counselor, I went and I put together. I call it the chemistry of virtue. It's a table of virtues that are based around 10 different virtues and all the elements that go along with each virtue. So inside of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
there's different elements of it, like logic and reason. We used to go with that. But there's also, creativity and balance, but intuition and spirituality, wonder and imagination, all of these things that allow us to wake up certain parts of wisdom that make us who we are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I came to this and realized that the experience that I went through was something that was brutal, traumatic, and yet it didn't define me. I can't, it doesn't define me to say I'm divorced. It doesn't define me to say I've lost my son. It doesn't define me to say that, anything else besides the things that I have learned to offer someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion, you know. So in doing that, and I, sent that over to you, but um, what it what it does is it allows us to look at our identity, look at our identity and say, who am I? And there's different ways to look at that, but that identity never changes. Okay. We don't have to look outside of ourselves and to say, I identify as, so I feel I can fit in, meaning I wear boots and Wranglers, but I'm not a cowboy. I don't identify as a cowboy. I identify as someone who wears boots and Wranglers because they're comfortable. I like to country down, all of this stuff, but I don't have a horse. I'm not a cowboy. I don't have cows, any of that stuff. My identity is still here.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at that and we say we can protect our identity by different elements of integrity, which like authenticity and vulnerability. Both of those
Mm-hmm.
words scare the hell out of all of us. Because if we're vulnerable, that means that we're wide open and somebody can come in and mentally and emotionally kill us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're authentic, that gives the opportunity for somebody to say, you're an idiot, you're dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you
Mm-hmm.
doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if we protect our authenticity and vulnerability, again with courage, with creativity and balance and happiness, different things like that, we can be who we are at any moment, at any time. We can be aware of what we need. All we have to do is wake up those specific elements. Okay. So I learned a whole lot about those and say it's not just
Mm-hmm.
about the healing process because a lot of times we say, from this experience, this is I'm defined, I'm broken, I'm scarred, I'm all of these things. We may have a scar, but there's a healing process, and that doesn't mean that if you have a scar on your arm, you have to cut your arm off because it doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to look at this, putting this and delving into the whole concept of these virtues, somebody will say, okay, help me to understand how, yeah, it sounds like what if I say I lost something, well, what is it that I lost? Well, I lost the acceptance or the understanding or different things that make me who I am, or how that I feel like that's who I am,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So if we use those same virtues, not just to heal, but to define us,
Mhm.
and somebody will, I've had people say, okay, just quit, quit talking like that. Give me just a good example. I say, okay, let's look at the um, the virtue of patience. And I've had people say, okay, I'm not patient. I'm like, well, good, because let's go over to the store and we will
Mhm.
find the oldest, slowest person and we'll get behind them and we will be patient
Mhm.
on purpose. And so that person is going to look
Mhm.
at us and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so slow. Well, we can look at them and say, it's just fine. There's nothing wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. And we can look at them and say, how can we help you? So, not just patience, but kindness and compassion and understanding and acceptance and tolerance and all of these amazing things that allow us to be in that moment and specifically say, this is who I am. This is who I want to be, because of not just because it's it makes me look great. What it does is
Mhm.
it allows us that good shot of dopamine and
Mhm.
oxytocin and all of that. So if we're depressed about something or have anxiety, that's a perfect healing aspect of virtue to say, in this moment, there's nothing else I need, and we can help that person. They're going to get the same because of the good feeling that they have that somebody is offering this beautiful moment, right? And anybody else who is watching gets that same benefit. That's a beautiful part about virtue, is that you don't have to be participating in.
Mhm.
You don't have to be the one who is giving or receiving. You can take that and say, "Oh my gosh, the most you know, the coolest thing I've ever seen happened yesterday," and da 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 da. But it allows us to want to think outside of ourselves and go forward, not pay it forward, but to realize or think, what can I do to offer the benefits to me and somebody else, just like we did, like I saw the other day, right? And somebody else. So I'd say this: when it comes down to it, let's define ourselves by those same virtues. And this is how I define myself. Okay? So I take my first name. So many times we look outside of ourselves, like being an athlete or a dad or a mom or a teacher or a sibling or an employee, an employer. If we look at ourselves and say the one thing that we can define ourselves by, if we introduced ourselves and I said, hi Joey, I'm Dorian. Well, a lot of people will say, well, that's great, but that's the connection that people make is usually our first name. So I say, here's how I
Mhm.
explain who I am. I say D is for dignity, and O is for originality, R is for respect, I is for individuality, A is for authenticity, and N is for nobility. If I walk out in the world and I remember that, I remember who I am, and somebody is rude to me or disrespectful or you know does something, I can look at that and say, am I acting with respect, not only to me but to them? Am I acting with
Mhm.
dignity? Am I being authentic in who I am? As soon as I get back to the house, I'm not putting that away. I'm just saying,
Mhm.
in the world, is that how I is that
Mhm.
did I act with and speak with and offer that to others while still offering that to me?
Mhm.
So the journey has been um, learning what the healing process, not only for me is, but when somebody goes through grief because of a loss. Now, the beautiful part is that a year to the day, that my son passed away, I had a group of friends ask me if I wanted to take a memorial hike up to the top of the mountain. And we took one of his lacrosse helmets and a little plaque with his last text up to the top. But what it allowed me to do, I tried to do it earlier, but my mind was not there, is to learn different life lessons about climbing this mountain. And based on these whether the trail is rocky or if there's no trail, if before I even take a step on that trail, what am I
Mm-hmm.
going to receive from this hike? But I was able to
Mm-hmm.
go up that mountain, sit on top, and look at this amazing, beautiful view. I mean, it's stunning. You can see
Mm-hmm.
forever. But what it allowed me to do is to take those life lessons and say, what is hiking a mountain really all about? What do we learn about it? And it doesn't have to be the hike that my son took. It could be the rolling hill that
Mm-hmm.
somebody likes to hike. They can learn different lessons, but also take. I took each one of those. I put 10 life lessons together, and I took each one of the virtues and their elements and attached it to the life lesson, so it offers more meaning to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a journey. I know but the other part is that we have to realize by taking a hike like that, or any hike, so to speak, we always look at, oh my gosh, how far am I from the top? How much farther have I got to go? And that, instead of looking at how far we've actually climbed, how far we've lifted ourselves above our current
Mm-hmm.
situation. And so to look at where we are right now and go all the way back to the bottom at the beginning of the hike, we can say, what have I learned? Am I so grateful for that I could only have learned by taking this hike? In doing so, there may be certain parts where unless we talk about it and realize what it is, we can get to the point where we're just not happy about how rocky it is and how dangerous it could be, because at some point we lost our footing, we fell down, we hit our knee, it's bleeding, there's a cut, and so we're like, why did we even do this? What is the purpose of this hike? I'd be so mad. And yet, in that same moment, we can look we can look at the beautiful parts of that event in that hike. For example, let's say, for example, where we fell and we're bleeding in that, we look over and there's the grass is overgrown, the bushes are overgrown, and yet underneath we see a baby deer or a little um, bird nest or a little stream or something that we never would have seen unless we would have lost our footing in that exact moment, went down. Every time we see the scar on our knee, we're not going to think about, oh, I hate that
Mm-hmm.
that trail. We're going to think about, did I ever
Mm-hmm.
tell you the time that I looked eye to eye 5 feet away from a baby deer? And if I would not have fallen, I would not have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole journey is taking each moment and trying to figure out. I'm going to say it differently. Not trying to figure out, realizing what it is in that moment. Because by doing that, we realize that everything is perfect in that moment. We don't need anything else. So
Mm-hmm.
don't look too far up the trail. Don't look too far down the trail. Be where you are in that moment. I don't tell many people that I love them. I don't say I love you. I tell them I love the hell out of you. Okay. And the reason I say that is because to me, that's saying you and I just spent time in this perfect moment and nothing else mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And we can walk away feeling fulfilled because of what that was. And so too many times we say, I love you, I love you, I
Mhm.
love you, I love you. And it doesn't mean anything because there's no actions there. But if we
Mhm.
understand what the time is that we take, it's beautiful. It's perfect.
What advice can you give to someone who is struggling with grief and finding it difficult to find hope?
I think the biggest lesson that I have learned is to realize what the pain is all about. For example, there are certain things that hurt worse than others when you are triggered because of grief. And it may be, the opportunities that aren't there or will never be there because of the loss of my son. I will never go to his wedding. I will never have grandkids from him. I will never have the opportunity to go fishing with him like I used to all the time. And yet, every time there is pain, I am so grateful that I have not numbed myself off from that kind of pain because of the fact that I know what it's from. So when somebody is struggling
Mhm.
with the grief, I think they need to understand or realize what is it that is causing the most amount of pain from that grief. Okay. And
Mhm.
it's not the experience. It's not the thing that we think it is. It's the secondary type of loss that, like for me, the loss of reality. When I'm standing there and thinking to myself, this cannot be real. And going forward,
Mhm.
uttering the words, my oldest son passed away. And when somebody will ask me about, um, so what about this or what about that? Or, and I say, I lost my oldest son almost 7 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry that, it's, I'm okay telling the story because
Mhm.
of where I'm at on my journey with it. But
Mhm.
early on, it was it was like the words would come out of my mouth, and it was almost so hard for me to believe what I'm even saying because
Mhm.
that can't be real. That cannot be real, you know. And so I think to look at what we feel like we have lost. Even if I looked at this and said, the loss of self trust. Why couldn't I do anything more? Why couldn't I have? Why didn't I put forth more effort into looking for him? Would that have helped? No,
Mhm.
if he passed away, it happened before we even started looking for it. And so I have to look at this and say, I have to allow myself grace. I have to
Mhm.
allow myself the things that I can only receive that I can't see, which are things like grace and compassion and acceptance of what it is. But I look at that and I say, too many times we put meaning on something where there can be no meaning.
Mhm.
So if somebody asks a question about why this or why that, sometimes there is no answer.
Mhm.
And so to realize that this is part of the journey and to to take that and look at them and say, grief is something that you're never going to get away from. You're not going to ever be the same person again. Please don't try,
Mhm.
but to take it and learn from what it actually is that because before that event, before that experience, this is who you are. After the experience, you're still that same person. You just have more, that experience allowed experience for you to go through to wake up these, virtues, these attributes, these characteristics that are inside of you, and
Mhm.
you don't know how strong you are until you have no choice in being that strong.
Mhm. How do you balance honoring the memory of your son while also embracing the present and finding joy in life?
You know, that is a fantastic question. I think the hard part for us sometimes is that if we feel like we are out looking for our own happiness and finding joy, that we forget, we let go of the memory of our loved one, the memory of everything that is dear to us. I think the hard part is that we feel guilty that we are trying to move forward in our life. In honor of my son, I am trying to find happiness. I am moving forward because my son is with me all the time. I feel him around me so many times where there should be things that trigger me, and yet it's almost as if he's basically saying, you know what, you need to be you. You need to find and remember who you are. And so everything that when I do something in honor of my son, it's with my whole heart. I still have to be me. I still have to be authentic to me and to who I am going forward with any connection that I have with another person, with something that is a goal of mine in life. Um, so the balance is like when you're driving down the road, you don't get too far to the right or too far to the left. You want to stay in the middle of your lane so that if something does affect you while you're driving in that lane, you're able to work through it and guide your car as opposed to try to control it all the time. There's so many things that I've learned with emotions and feelings, and whether they be good emotions, whether they be emotions, that a person who is grieving the loss of a loved one or a loss of a child, there's so many that hit you so hard like a wave that you don't see coming. And yet, sometimes the good emotions are just as tough to navigate. I've learned to sit with them. I've learned to feel my way through and see what I need to do, or see what how I want to feel or how I want to proceed with it. It was hard at the first, and yet I've learned over the years that the pain that comes with some of those, it's still the love that I have for my son and honor him by allowing that pain to stay, but not to keep it there on my plate the whole time. I think we, if we let go, it's almost as if we think that that person is leaving or the memories are leaving or whatever. And so to honor my son, again, it's to focus on becoming the very best me because of this experience, because of everything that I've learned from it.
Mhm. What have been some of the most valuable lessons you've learned from your own grief and loss?
I would have to say, probably the most valuable above all of them. Well, two of them. The first one is that no matter what it is, the things that we're most afraid of, and the things that we grieve, are things that we think we can never ever make it through, or get past, or move through. Um, there were things that I thought, if this happens, I'm not going to make it. If this doesn't happen, I'm not going to make it. So I'd say the first most valuable lesson is I had to pull myself all the way back and absolutely live in the moment. Some people don't understand that. They say, well, how can you not plan for, a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? It's because of the fact that I had to learn to take it one breath at a time, one step at a time, 1 second at a time, because that's all I could deal with right now. That's all I could deal with. What it's allowed me to do is it's allowed me to have to rely on my intuition, which has been an amazing thing because it allows me to do things on purpose when I have a feeling that that's what I need to do or something I need to say.
Mhm.
It has allowed me to make connections with people who there's no reason that we would have met otherwise. But even if I'm driving down the road and I know that I will be on time to something, to meet up with somebody to go somewhere or help them with something, I'm supposed to go right. If my intuition says go left, I go left. I don't know why, but then when I come across the person who has a flat tire and has been praying for 45 minutes for help, it's pretty clear why I turn left instead of right. The second most valuable lesson is that no matter what somebody is going through, there's a connection because of the grief. I may not have gone through what they're going through, but I can look at them and say, we're the same, just different trials. No matter what a person is going through, the grief and the loss process, even if I understand, I don't understand, I can sit with them. I can offer compassion at an unlimited amount because it's not coming from me, it's coming through me. I think that's a huge lesson that we forget, that we can connect with somebody else even though we don't understand.
How can the viewers find you on social media?
Um, Probably the best place to find me is on Facebook. My It's just under Dorian Johnson. I have a page where I post a lot of different things, how I'm feeling. I've got a couple Facebook groups also. One of them is called A Day in the Life of Grief. And it's, things are posted in there about how not only I'm feeling, but people in the group, how they're feeling throughout the day, and we can connect that way. I have another one called Unsung Heroes, and we find all sorts of good things that are happening in the world and post them, and we cry when we do that because there's so many good things that are happening in the world, and we forget that even in our world we can do the
Mhm.
same type of thing. So you can find me on um, Facebook under my name, Dorian Johnson. A Day in the Life of Grief is one of my groups. Unsung Heroes is another one, and then I do a lot on TikTok, um, and it's under Balin's dad.